Hi everyone, this is the video lesson for 5.7 Trig Identities Day 2 Part 1. If you haven't watched Day 1 Part 1 yet, or if you haven't watched Day 1 Part 2 yet, please go back and watch them before continuing with Day 2. So just like Day 1, we're giving you the same 5 steps to go through a trig proof. Start with the more difficult side. Write it in terms of sine and cosine. Simplify this. Use some tools, and we're going to give you more tools in a moment. These will be brand new. And of course, number 5, the most important step in my mind, factor and or use what I called the move. So let's start with some new tools in the toolbox. Now, the major difference between Day 1 and Day 2 is that we're now working with secondary or reciprocal trig ratios. So for example, cosecant x is the same as 1 over sine x. Secant x is 1 divided by cosine x. Cotangent x is the same as 1 divided by tan x. Or if you think about this in terms of sine and cosine, cotangent x is really cosine x divided by sine x. Now, there's more. If you recall from Day 1, we wrote down the fact that sine square x plus cos square x equals to 1. And I'm going to set it up like this so you can see the two new ideas in a moment. The moment is here. So you know, if you divide both the left and the right by sine square x, this equation becomes 1 plus cotangent square x, which equals to cosecant square x. Likewise, if you divide everything in terms of cos square x, this becomes tan square x plus 1, which equals to secant square x. And again, by using these formulas or tools, you're going to do this a lot faster. Here we go. Example 1. Again, start with the fact that you believe you can do this. Start with the belief and make it happen through action. Now, for number 1, it says cotangent x divided by cotangent x plus tan x equals to 1 minus sine square x. So the more difficult side is going to be the left. And again, I'm telling you with practice, you can start with the left, you can start with the right. It doesn't even make a difference. It's the same thing at the end. Now, here's a couple of ideas you want to think about before moving on. If you look at the right-hand side, this is 1 minus sine square x. Or maybe you're thinking cos square x. So somehow we have to simplify this into cos square x, which will give you 1 minus sine square x. Again, there are a couple ways of looking at this. The most basic method is to rewrite this in terms of sine and cosine. So cotangent x becomes cosine x over sine x. Likewise, if you look at the denominator, cosine x over sine x. And of course, tan x is sine x over cosine x. Now it goes to combine them with a common denominator. Now at the top, I'm just going to copy for now. And if you look at the bottom, the common denominator is going to be sine x times cosine x, which means you have to multiply the first part by the missing common denominator, which is cosine x over cosine x, which is really 1. Likewise, in the second part, you multiply by the missing common denominator, which is sine x over sine x, which again will give you 1. So you're not changing the actual value, you're just changing the form. Now notice what happens. Cos x times cos x will give you cos x squared. Sin x times sin x will give you sin x squared. At this point, I'm assuming you've done some homework. I'm assuming you're improving your math skills. So you should be able to recognize that cos square x plus sin square x equals to 1. So again, don't forget when there's a fraction divided by a second fraction, you take the first fraction and you multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction. So now if you look at the top and the bottom, there's a common sine x, which you can cross out. And as expected, I've mentioned the fact that you should get cos square x, which is 1 minus sine square x. And that's exactly the same as the right-hand side. Again, the challenge is you can always go back and try to redo this, starting with the right-hand side. Let's keep going. Number 2. Now in this case, you have secant x plus tan x divided by secant x minus tan x, which equals to 1 plus 2 sine x plus sine square x divided by cos x squared. So again, the more difficult side appears to be the left. Step 1, just copy it. Step 2, again, begin with the end in mind. Your goal is to rewrite this only in terms of sine and cosine. So do not leave it in terms of secant or tan x at this point. So secant x is the same as 1 over cosine x. And of course, tan x is sine x over cosine x. Likewise, if you look at the denominator, that's going to be 1 over cosine x minus sine x over cosine x. That's a plus sign. That was my mistake. I hope you were paying attention. So now, if you keep going, in the numerator, you combine them as one fraction, which is 1 plus sine x over cosine x, all over. If you look at the denominator, that's 1 minus sine x, all over cosine x. And again, you can multiply the first fraction by the reciprocal of the second one, or really, through practice, cosine x over cosine x becomes 1, and you keep going. Now again, this is really, really important. If you're stuck, remember, you could practice what I called the move. Look at the right-hand side. Right now we have this cos square x at the bottom, and we don't have it in terms of the current step. That's perfectly okay. Think about how you can get from 1 minus sine x to cos square x. So again, if you've done enough homework, you should be able to recognize this. And the idea is, if you multiply the top and the bottom by 1 plus sine x, this will give you 1 minus sine square x, which is cos square x, which is exactly what we're looking for. So if you expand this, look what happens. At the bottom, that's going to be 1 minus sine square x, because again, difference of squares. If you look at the top, that's a perfect square, which means if you expand that, it's going to be 1 plus 2 sine x plus sine x squared. Last but not least, if you express the bottom in terms of cosine while copying the top, the bottom is going to be cosine square x. And if you look at it, this is exactly the same as the right-hand side. One more example. Example number 3. Now again, 1 plus sine x over 1 minus sine x equals to tan x plus secant x quantity squared. So, if you want to start with the more difficult side, you can start with the right-hand side. Tan x plus secant x quantity squared. Now, let's give you a moment. Try this. And when you watch the next part, part 2, I will take this up. And of course, you can go back, redo number 1, starting with the right-hand side, redo number 2 with the right-hand side, or just redo this without looking. So I hope this makes sense, and I'll see you in part 2.